and media undergraduate majors. Oh, wonderful, great. And graduate students? Okay, wonderful, and I know we have a few faculty here as well. So this is the first in a series that we hope to do every year, where we're going to bring a visiting artist to campus for 2 to 3 days to visit classes, do critiques of student work, and do presentations like this. And so when we found out that we would be able to do this through some funding that the Arts and Sciences Division at Hunter got, I started thinking about who could we bring. And then across my social media feed came this news that Alessandra Lacorazza had won, not one, but 2 top awards at Sundance Film Festival. Now, yes. So I didn't know Alessandra personally, but I knew that she was connected to the Meerkat Media Collective, which she's going to tell you more about, but it's a worker-owned cooperative that I work with. Many of our graduate students are part of it. And even some of our undergrads have interned there, and I would actually recommend that for those of you who are interested in doing the type of work that they do, which is mostly documentary. And so I called up Alessandra, and immediately I was like, oh, this is so great. She's so down to earth, she's so smart, she's no bullshit at all. And also, what I loved about her is that she's kind of found her own trajectory to where she is, and it's not like NYU Film School Tisch or USC, which kind of feeds you into the industry and a kind of path that exists for those kind of students. She kind of made her own way, didn't go to film school, and I felt like she might have a lot in common with some of our students. She grew up in, she was born in Colombia, moved to the US when she was 5, and had to work to make a living and find a way to build a sustainable career in film and media while also pursuing her own art. And so I know that I thought that this might be of interest to our students. So I asked her to talk a little bit about that. How did she just connect the dots a little bit of how she got to where she is now. So this is Alessandra. Let's give her a welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. My day yesterday was phenomenal, and excited to kind of kick off day 2. So as Kelly said, I was born in Colombia. These are pictures of me not smiling, as is throughout my whole childhood. As a kid, this is classic 1990s Colombian parents dressing you identically. And we moved to the States, and my dad kind of gave my mom an ultimatum, and he's like, we have to move, and it's either Australia or the US, and if it's the US, we can't move to Florida. Probably some self-hatred on his part, but it was the summertime, and they visited several areas, and they went to Seattle, Washington, and it was gorgeous, beautiful weather. So they moved us to a suburb of Seattle, and they opened up a bakery there. And of course, Seattle's actually super rainy and very cloudy, and we were the only Latin family. It was predominantly white, non-Latin, and my mom had a terrible time. She had a really hard time connecting with people. She was learning the language. My dad already spoke English, and she felt super, super, super isolated. And so once their marriage broke up and my dad went back to Colombia, my mom tried to make it a go and stay there for a while, but her depression got really, really bad, and eventually she was like, we're moving down to Florida. And that was a huge culture shock for me, because I just assimilated, I was 5 till about 11, 12. I just assimilated to this very specific brand of white-ish, mostly white culture. And everyone, I was like the little Latin kid, the brown kid, even though I'm obviously white. And then I go to Florida, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm Latin, and everyone's gonna accept me, and this is gonna be great. And they're like, you're not Latin. And I was like, yeah, I was born in Colombia. They're like, on a plane? So it was a huge culture shock. It was not good. And so I didn't quite run away, but I went to go visit my dad during Christmas vacation, and I just didn't get back on the plane in Colombia. And I ended up living with my dad there for 2 years, which was incredible in hindsight, knowing everything I know now. Not only did it let me connect with my country, because I left when I was so young, and that was a really important experience for me. It solidified my Spanish language, and it gave me some really precious time with my dad that I think, he passed away when I was in my 20s. So that ended up being really important to me. But, as chaotic childhoods go. After 2 years, I was like, the ship is sinking here. I gotta flee again. So I went back to Florida, and I started high school in South Florida, and was a nerdy kid. I was really into science, really into math, and everyone sort of assumed that I would go into some kind of academic career. But film was always a passion of mine. It was always something that I really loved. I learned English by watching TV, would kind of consume anything. And I think childhood I was like a really lonely, introverted kid. So like TV and films were kind of my companions. So I ended up, don't tell my mom I put this picture up here, but that's me on my graduation day from New College of Florida. Very liberal arts college, where we were encouraged to dress up however we wanted on graduation. And of course I went big. But now that school is actually being turned into a Christian college, if anyone is familiar with New College of Florida, so RIP. But at the time, so I started studying psychology, but I was really interested in media representation and how stereotypes are developed. And I kind of was shifting my focus more into a sociology, with a sociological lens, and I wanted to study media and through psychology in college. So I applied to grad school. I was really struck by an article that I read, a study that found that people in an island off the Pacific had stereotypes about black people, even though they had never seen a black person, and it was thought that this was because of TV, of American television. So I was really interested in like how we're passing down stereotypes and mores of discrimination, and that's what I wanted to study. And so I applied to grad school. I was waitlisted at one school, and I was still waiting to hear back about 2 schools, and a lot of things happened in a very short amount of time. I was living in Texas. My girlfriend at the time was moving to California within like a month. The sandwich shop I was working at closed down. And so my ex was like, come to New York. Come crash on my sofa. I live in a basement studio apartment in Midtown with my current girlfriend, her 2 cats, and a dog. And I was like, that sounds great. So I came to New York in February. There was a ton of snow on the floor. And was like, I think I was babysitting. I think my first job was actually Children International, the canvassing, those people that stop you on the street and ask you to give money. And I did that for a month. I was not good at it. And within like these few months, feeling the energy of the city, it was 2008, like economy was crashing. Everyone was like, there's no security everywhere. And I never thought of a career in film because I grew up with some economic insecurities, and seeing my mom struggle and marrying in order to feel financially stable, I was like, I have to be able to support myself. And I was like, how do you do that doing art? Like it would never seem like an option for me. But because everything was going crazy, I was like, fuck it. I want to study film. And so at that point, I was like, I'm gonna go to film school. But I didn't. I ended up getting through some fluke this place, Lost Planet, which is still in existence. It's a post-production commercial editing facility in Soho. They posted on Craigslist looking for interns. No one does that anymore. Don't actually look on Craigslist for jobs. They're not there. And this was an unpaid internship, which is illegal in New York City. You should get paid for your internships. But I took it. I was babysitting at the time. I fit in with my schedule. And I kind of flourished there. I did the internship for maybe 3 or 4 months and just really clicked with the people. I had never even used a Mac computer. I knew nothing. I was like coming in at 0. So I learned how to use the Mac computer, and then eventually I got hired to do the front desk. And so that is like placing orders, doing coffee runs, talking to clients, setting up rooms, all those things. And I just loved the environment. The hours were awful. The pay was not good. But But Lost Planet did something that was really special, and it was they had this feel of like raising people up. So they really invested in their interns, in their apprentices, in their junior editors, and you could see it. A lot of the people who were like partners or like senior editors like started off as interns there. And so it felt like there was a lot of potential. So I decided not to go to film school because also couldn't figure out how to pay for it. And this was kind of my film school training. And I think, and then I went to the vault, and so I learned all about like digitizing tapes that we did back in the day. I don't even think they do that anymore, making DVDs and organizing, and you know, and that's actually served me well. I'm like, my files are very organized on my computer, and I can always find them, which makes my life easier. And then I became kind of their top assistant editor. You know, I was very good at the job. Google was my best friend because you can Google, like, this is not working, and most of the times there's like some answer on Google about like the Avid's crashing, Premiere, you know. We weren't using Premiere that much, that was like just the beginning of Premiere. It was Final Cut and Avid. And the other huge benefit that Lost Planet had is they had huge talent there. You know, Hank Corwin is a big time editor. Most recently, I think he did The Big Short and a bunch of the Adam McKay. And in the commercial world, he's kind of a legend because he's kind of this avant-garde, sound-obsessed guy that does a lot of montage juxtapositions. And all the other editors that either he brought up or were also working, like Sar Klein, Jay Rabinowitz, who's also like a legend in himself, like they were all eager to work with us young people and like be like, oh, you know what, why don't you take a pass at this little edit, and that's how you got to learn. So my film school was learning commercials, but in this like, which are like, you know, 60 to 30 seconds, not a frame over, and learning how to tell a story arc in that time. Learning how to juxtapose the images to tell a story. And I learned the importance of sound. Like, you know, your images could be beautiful, but if you don't have sound to help tell your story, it's not gonna land with your audience. I was there for 5 years. And I, you know, was making pretty decent money, mostly because I was working like sometimes up to 90 hours a week with clients. It was a little soul crushing at times. Made incredible friends, people that to this day are still collaborators of mine. But after a point, I was like, I love editing. I can see myself having a career in editing. This is a skill I can be paid to do. And that was a huge benefit. But I was working with mostly white, straight men in power. There was very little diversity, and it was only in commercials. And I wanted to tell my own stories. I wanted to write. I wanted to one day direct something. And because of the hours I was working, there was just no ability for me to do that. So I took a jump with the help of Jay Rabinowitz. I assisted edited him on a project that he did with Steve McQueen. It was a pilot for HBO that never went anywhere. But I got to go to Amsterdam to work with Steve for like a month. He introduced me to all the lesbians of Amsterdam. It was very kooky, very fun. But he, you know, in conversations with him, he said like, well, if you want to do something, you should write a script. Like, no one's going to give you those opportunities. You have to make them for yourself. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so I wrote my first script, which was based in Colombia, and it was going to be filmed there. And it was a beautiful story, but I had no connections in Colombia. And I didn't know anyone there, and it just proved too difficult to try to get something done. So I put that script away. And then I wrote what would eventually become my first script that I will talk about a little bit later, Mommy, something that was more contained. And in the meantime of writing Mommy, I co-wrote it with a friend. I went to a lesbian wedding in Cancun, which doesn't seem relevant, but there I met this trans artist, Julia Weldon, who we kind of hit it off. We became friends, and they were about to release their album Comatose Hope, that they wrote after they were in a coma post top surgery. And this was also a little bit after Pulse. And so they're like, do you want to direct a music video? And I hadn't directed anything at the time, and I was like, what do I have to lose? They didn't have the money to pay me for that work, but they had the money to pay people that we could hire, and they had a small budget. And I was like, this seemed like a great opportunity. So I'm gonna play that, my first ever foray into directing music video that we did in honor of the Pulse victims, and we released it as part of a fundraiser for the Ali Forney Center. So these are the names of all the Pulse victims, and those are also what people were writing on the mirror. I'm gonna let them play out. But for me, this video was about highlighting the importance of these queer spaces for the queer community, and how like an attack on those spaces are an attack also on our community in a deep level, because oftentimes, especially in places where there's not a lot of acceptance, these are the only places where people can feel connected and accepted. And so we threw a party. We invited everyone in our community, and the casting for this was people just to be themselves. So I talk to friends and talk to people who kind of like, what makes you happy? How do you connect? And so one of the dancers, he was really into yoga and stretching. And so I just worked with everyone to kind of be like, what makes you feel safe in your body? And we talked about that. But that was my first experience, and it was incredible and beautiful and heartbreaking and difficult, you know, because I didn't know what I was doing in a lot of ways. You know, I learned that you can ask for a lot of favors. So we shot at a bar in Brooklyn, which name is right now I'm escaping, even though I've been there like 50,000 times, in Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy area. And they gave us the space for like nearly free. Like before they opened, their things are like clean up after yourselves. I got a friend who was a DJ to come do the DJ set, and everyone just kind of volunteered their time. We were able to pay the people that were doing the electrical and some people there, but it was all like kind of a labor of love, paying people what we could to be a part of it. And so something that I had learned in my career in editing is like working for free doesn't always work out. I think you have to be careful as an artist when you're giving your services for free, because oftentimes it can lead to exploitation and people not taking you seriously as an artist and not respecting you. So this is one of the few times that I did it and it worked out, because I got something beautiful for my reel and I was able to gain a lot of experience, but it was also with someone I trusted, you know? I did the editing myself as well, but I've had situations where if they don't have money, at least $200, something to be like, I'm investing my time, you have to invest something in it. But this was something that did work out. But again, I caution people to like give their services for free. I mean, we all, you know, should be paid for our work. And it was shortly after I shot this video that I came in contact with Meerkat Media. Is anyone here familiar with Meerkat? A few people? Okay, sort of. So Meerkat is a collective and worker co-op. They are kind of split into two branches. It's a little confusing. So it's a branch of artists and then a branch of people that own a production company, but it's all collaboratively run, and the production company pays for the artist. Like, it's not really a fellowship, it's more like you join, it's sort of a residency, but that's like a misnomer because there's no end. You stay until you decide you don't want to be there anymore. So I originally applied as an artist resident, and at first I was like, there was 15 of us and we were all doing working groups together, and I'm just learning about how to make decisions as a group and dividing tasks into working groups, and I had never collaborated in that way. But one of the benefits that Meerkat gave you is they give you a small stipend, and they give you access to cameras and lights and sound equipment, so it made it way more feasible for you to make a project. And Meerkat does tend to focus a little bit more in documentary, because I think that's where they were founded originally. It was like a group of friends from Sarah Lawrence who just pulled resources. So someone bought a camera, or two of them bought a camera, and then they all decided to share it, and they would work on each other's projects, and slowly they like co-directed a feature film that they all kind of switched roles, and slowly Meerkat became more of a thing. Eventually that like group, a few of them broke off, I think it was 6 of them, and formed an LLC production company. And so they learned all the finances. They learned everything from top to bottom and wanted it to be democratically run. So if you're in the co-op, you are part owner of the co-op and you're running the business together, which is something anyone can do. You know, you all from Hunter can get together and decide to do something like this and support each other. Because I have found in my career that having peer-to-peer relationships are the most important relationships you're going to have. Those are the people that are going to uplift you. Those are the people that are going to give you feedback. Those are the people that are going to work on your projects and kind of hold your hand when things are hard. So cultivating those relationships and going out there and networking. And it's not just about meeting that fancy producer or that financier. It's about meeting people that are at your level that you can grow with, that can be your cinematographer you love, that can be your editor. And so after, I think I was in the artist collective for about 2 years, there was an opening in the co-op. And I applied and I got it. And then I learned how to run a business, which I had no idea how to do. I immediately was HR and finance, so we did everything from like looking at QuickBooks and learning how to balance a budget, to how to pay people out, looking at our budgets, learning how to produce. Like that was my first foray into producing. And then making decisions, like the collective process was like, there was 7 of us at the time. And so do we want to buy a new camera? The voting process, looking at our budget, each working group kind of working separately but together in order to make business decisions. It was because I was just from like an artist or technical background, I had no idea about any of it. And it really helped inform like how I thought about the business side of film as well. So it was a really good learning experience. And that became my job. So it was like I was able to pay my bills, not at the beginning, wasn't making a ton of money, but it was sustainable. And I was writing my own projects. I made Mommy, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, as I said. And then I got into branded content, and that was another way to continue to hone in on your skills and make a living. People are familiar with branded content. They're like companies that give you money to put in their brand. It depends on how much the brand is in, but usually to tell some kind of like docu story. The film I'm going to show now is a short doc that the New York Times tea brand contacted us about, and it was for Pride. We're highlighting for Tiffany. And so since it was for Pride, it was very important to me that if you're going to make money off the queer community should be making money back. So I only hired queer people to work on this project. So the DP, the sound person, the first AC, the editor, like everyone, the producer, everyone was queer on the project. And we shot on Fire Island, which I love Fire Island. It was super fun. Really hard place to shoot because there's no infrastructure. There's little cars that take you everywhere. It's very expensive. But it was really fun, and Doug and Bill kind of led us into their lives and let us tell their story. So I'm going to play that next.
When I first met Doug in the 80s, I was at a stage in my life where a relationship was the last thing I was looking for. We were together for 6 months, but then we both drifted apart. 12 years later, by chance, we crossed paths out on Fire Island.
Hey. Good morning.
I recognized Doug immediately. He still had the same good energy. Every year, Fire Island gets hammered by hurricanes, and with each storm, there's loss. It can be heart-wrenching at first, but then there's beauty as things bounce back. Love is a lot like that. Did you recognize me that day in 2000 at the beach?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Being in a relationship with Doug taught me that it needs to constantly evolve. Our relationship continues to surprise me in that it's on a much more profound level. We connect as people, we connect physically, we connect intellectually, we connect emotionally. What do I love about Doug? I love Doug.
So again, if I didn't tell you it was a Tiffany commercial, you might not have picked up on it. But and branded content is kind of like that. It depends on the company and what they want to do. Does anyone, can the lights come back on? Okay.
We're working on it. I don't know where our light person went. Turn lights on here. Oh, thank you.
That's okay. I wanted to pause for a second and see if anyone had questions so far, either about Meerkat or my trajectory.
You were talking about that you were able to make a sustainable living with Meerkat. What was the mix of the kinds of projects that you were doing to bring in the revenue to the co-op?
So my career up till this point was mostly sustained through editing. So it would be editing little shorts or editing commercials or Meerkat, our bread and butter is really doing like nonprofit videos. So a lot of gala videos for different nonprofits. So it's a mixture of that, but mostly a lot of my income was from editing. Just knowing a technical skill like that and being able to like just work on someone else's project with funding, like it just, that's how I made the majority of it. But at Meerkat, I also started directing a little bit more and producing projects, and that's how I kind of got my income stream. Anyone have any other questions?
The shot of the deer, did you get that by a happy accident?
The what, I'm sorry?
The shot of the deer.
There's so many deer in Fire
You just
Island.
got lucky,
There's,
just waited for one and
yeah.
was that the plan? Let's wait for a deer, or
I mean,
did you
yes,
have to be
there,
out
we
there
wanted to
checking it out?
capture some of the nature. There's so many, and most of them are like really gross looking, like they are not healthy.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot there.
I'm just wondering about your crew on Fire Island. When you say there's no infrastructure, it's very difficult to shoot. What was your crew?
It was very small, so it was me, the producer, the DP, assistant camera, sound, and maybe one like PA, and then the someone from the Times that came in. So it was small, yeah.
And what did they do? I was wondering about that connection, the Times as well.
So they were the kind of creative director. So they had the idea, and with them we kind of solidified what we would do. They nailed down, they did the casting. So every creative director works differently. Adam and I have a great relationship. This was our first time working together. So I kind of pitched what my visual style, and I did a treatment for them, and then we kind of fed off of each other, and I collaborated on the story. Yeah. Okay.
Is there any interference from the Times? I mean, you plan. You said you did a treatment. Do you
Yeah.
storyboard, or
This one was so easy.
Yeah.
Like the treatment I submitted, I don't think there was any revisions on it, and we were actually kind of freaked out because we submitted the first cut to Tiffany, and they're like, "We love it," and we're like, and so we didn't have a ton of feedback. There were things that we were working, and there's always difficulty in the edit trying to find the flow, but it was, I mean, a pretty easy project. They don't all go like that.
Sometimes I think that some people feel like music video is this thing apart, and I'm wondering, like, I could see your editing, the connections there, and the films that I've seen of yours, like what you took from that experience that informed your later creative work.
Yeah, I think trying to keep it as real, like casting real people as themselves, and trying to tell a story, even though it was like a music video, but having like a clear beginning and end. And just getting comfortable working with actors, even though none of them were actual actors, but like making them comfortable in front of the camera, talking to them about what things do they empower them and what things do they really not want to show. Working with a musician who has a lot of vulnerability and is very specific about how they want their image on camera, that was also interesting. So it's a lot of the little building blocks that you start creating on your smaller projects that then end up kind of paying off later on. Yeah, but I love music videos. I'd really love to do more of them. I feel like they're so creative, and you get to experiment in a way that you don't often get to do in other work.
You said this project for branded content went really smoothly. Could you talk about a time where it was a little bit harder to balance the creative aspects you wanted to bring in and what the brand wanted to bring in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for commercials and branded content, they're trying to, it's a specific thing that they're trying to do. So I think your job as a creative is to try to usher in what their objectives are. But, you know, the people that work behind the scenes, they have different experiences with working with directors or working, you know, some of them have worked with them a lot and others don't know the process of editing. And so some of the things that you have is they kind of want something finished and polished right away, not knowing that it takes time to tell a story. We did another project with the Times with HP, and that one was really hard in terms of editing. I think there was like a disconnect. We had a treatment, they had a few revisions, but nothing drastic, and then we shot the treatment. And they just kept wanting something else and something different. And so at that point, we're like, well, we can't reshoot. So it was like restructuring and refinding. And that one, the editing took a really, really long time to kind of nail it down and meld with it. But sometimes that happens. They'll approve a treatment and then it turns out like, oh, I actually don't want any of that. And then you have to figure out how to work with that to try to get to them. Because like, I think a lot of directors approach it as like, well, this is something I want for my reel, but with commercials, you really are working for a client. You really are, like they're the ones that are the experts in their business, or if they're a nonprofit in the community they're trying to reach, they're the ones that know how to reach those community, and you can guide and give advice, but at the end of the day, like it should be their vision that you're just helping to execute, if that makes sense. Cool, I'm gonna keep going. So I'm gonna talk about Mommy, my first short. I co-wrote it. I had the idea after visiting my mom for Christmas with she was my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, and my sister, and we were sitting in a sauna, and I was feeling really claustrophobic in the family environment. And so I had this idea for kind of a dark exploration of mental health and what young people can do to kind of escape the caregiving that is sometimes expected, especially in Latin families, but I think in other immigrant families as well. You're just kind of expected to take care of your parents and show up and kind of give up a lot of yourself. And so I wanted to explore like a mom that has deep depression, which I'm very familiar with a daughter that just wanted to escape and makes a bad decision in order to escape. I wrote the script, and then through Meerkat and having the access to Meerkat, I had access to equipment and people that worked for either free or like basically free, because it was just like a very nominal fee. And I had saved a bunch of money for years, like with my editing. I'm very good at saving. I would always put money into what I call my film fund, and I just like, you know, every month, every while, like just put money in. And when I accumulated about $5,000, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without the access that Meerkat gave me for equipment and all that. And it was very intimidating because I set the date, because that's what you have to do in order to cast actors. But I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is panic. I'm going to show the first few minutes of Mommy, and then we'll talk about the process a little bit more.
What do you want? Yeah, why? her? Yeah, home. Hey, yeah, so her prescriptions were more expensive, and I'm trying to figure out why. Did her copay go up or something? What about the generic? Mommy. Mommy. Mommy, you've been in bed for days. Come on, get up. Get up, let's go to the Wilsons. It'll make you feel better.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. So we had a small crew. It was a 3-day shoot. We did 1 day in Brooklyn and 2 days in Albany. One of the other benefits I got from Meerkat that was not expected is one of the members had a sauna in his house that I got the location for free. So that was incredible. This is how much production, and then the other number is everything in post. So obviously not my editing fee, but color, sound, film festivals, DCP, the whole thing. We did an open call for casting, and that was a whole new learning experience, putting out sides, which are just taking bits of the script to give actors to read, and taping and working with actors for the first time. And figuring out how to do it. I used a producer friend who was kind of volunteering her time, but before we went to Albany, they ended up getting super sick and bailed at the last minute. So my wife was like, well, I used to be an organizer, maybe I can help. And she kind of took over and produced it. She was great at it, The one thing she did is she didn't get a release for one of the locations. I mentioned this yesterday, and I'm still thinking about it. And every once in a while I mention it to her. She's like, you're not getting sued yet. So yeah, it's still okay, but
Take the yet off.
Yeah. And so, you could see my rudimentary drawings will continue to plague me to this day, but I tried to figure out a way to communicate with my DP as to tell the story and to map it out as best as possible. And then, working with the actors is really difficult. And so for me, I just always try to approach anytime I'm working with actors with vulnerability, because that's what you're asking them to do in front of the camera, is be vulnerable. So with the daughter, we each did journaling as the character, that I then gave her my journals. I didn't ask her to share hers because she wanted to keep them private, and I thought that was okay. Just to kind of get the backstory, what is the character like? Is the character, did she go to college? Did she apply to college and not get in? Or are her friends there? Just trying to get in her psyche, what is driving her? What kind of music does she listen to? Does she have preferences for food? All of those things kind of will help inform them. And then with the mom, it was just tapping into the emotions that she had been familiar with. She had experienced some of those depressive emotions, so it's tapping into those moments and working with them. And then I did the editing myself, which I was really excited to do. And in order to create some of that distance, because you do need distance from the work, that's why usually people hire editors. Oh, I'm tapping the mic, I'm sorry. I solicited a lot of feedback. I sent this link to everyone and their mother multiple times to get feedback. And the thing that I learned about feedback is everyone is always going to respond from their biases and their perspective and their personal aesthetic, and that's fine. That's what you want them to do. But when you start getting feedback that is in the same vein, around the same places, that's where you know that there's a problem. there's something the audience isn't getting, or there's something you're trying to say that's not clicking. And that's, when I would get a comment over and over and over and over again, that's where I knew I had to keep on tweaking it. And I think the biggest lesson maybe that I learned from Mommy, besides like it being sort of like my film school, like I learned everything possible and it's really important lessons, but is also dealing with rejection and how difficult it is to be vulnerable and put your work out there. We ended up playing at Palm Springs Short Fest, which was an incredible festival, but before that we got a ton of rejection. I think I had gotten at least 10 other rejections from other festivals before we got in there, and they all stung. Every single time you get one, it hurts. The thing that I do, and I probably get that from like my messed up childhood, is like all of those rejections, I turn them into motivation. Like for me, I was like, well, I just want to work harder. I just want to like dive into something else. Like it motivates me to keep going. But it's very easy for those rejections to weigh you down. And you see, it's so easy to compare yourself to your peers and like, oh, this person just got into Sundance and their career's taking off, or this person just got into this opportunity or got this grant. And even to this day, that continues to happen. But I always try to kind of center myself and really try not to compare myself, because we're all on our own journey. And if we're constantly being jealous or comparing ourselves to our peers, you're just going to drown, and you're going to kind of weigh down your own creative energy, and that's something that you have to protect. But Mommy, we played at Palm Springs, and then we played other festivals, and I got connected with NALIP, which is the National Association of Independent Latin Producers, I think is the correct acronym. And that was great, because that was the first time I kind of got connected with other Latin filmmakers, and they were so supportive, and so they were so excited. I played at one of their festivals, and it was through them that I got connected to the fellowship I ended up doing with the WGA, that I'll talk about a little bit more later, because that's ended up being how I got In the Summer's Made, is like through the connections I made. So Mommy kind of was like a calling card. It was a learning experience, and it just got me out there meeting people, because this is an industry all about connections, for better or for worse. So In the Summers is, if y'all are sticking around later, is the film we're going to be showing later on today, that played at Sundance. And it's very autobiographical, whereas like Mommy is me dealing with my mommy issues, this is me dealing with my daddy issues. And I got the idea talking to my sister. We were like sitting around the table, and we were just talking about, my dad passed away when I was 25, and that is kind of a whole nother very, very marking story. But we were just talking about him and reminiscing, and we had spent our summers kind of going back and visiting him, being from like divorced parents. And I was like, oh, was that the summer I went, or was that the summer I didn't go? We were just trying to do like a chronology, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, that is a really interesting structure for a film, to just examine this complex, beautiful, but severely wounded man through these little segments that their daughters see them. And from there, I did a very, very, very brief outline, and wrote the script, pulling from my own experiences. I, you apply for a million things, you don't get them, so I created my own residency, where I shipped myself to France for a month in a tiny little studio apartment in Toulouse, kind of away from all the noise, in a different time zone, and spent a month just writing the first draft of the script. And it came out, I think that's the thing of like, people say write what you know. There's a reason people say that, because that's where you're going to be able to dig into your truth, especially at the beginning, so much easier. So it was just about like, I was still researched in the sense that I was like reading my own journals, journaling myself about those feelings, like trying to reconnect with my dad, post his death, and trying to see things from his perspective to some extent. Talking to my sister, talking to my aunts and uncles, and like recalling stories, and it was a hard process, but it was like really beautiful, and I actually think that I forgave my dad so much in the process. Like it ended up being very therapeutic, because the thing, I had he like visited me in a dream, and I'm not usually wooey, but this happened. And he's like, don't make me a stereotype. That was like the message of the dream. And so, I'm dealing with a Latin man who has drug issues, who has anger issues, and we see a lot of those depictions, we see them all the time. But I wanted to show it with more complexity. I wanted to show it, I was like, yeah, people can have those things, but they're not necessarily bad, and they can still love their kids and try really hard and fail. Like we can fail and not necessarily be a bad person. So I continued to kind of tweak the script. I think I already had a rough version by the time Mommy was doing the festival circuit. And Nalip recommended me for this WGA fellowship. So I applied with a sample of In the Summers and like a pitch for another program. And it was COVID. It was like, the beginning of COVID, 2020, and so everything was remote. It took forever for them to make a decision, but I ended up getting in. And it was a cohort. I think we were the first cohort. It was the WGA Film Nation Fellowship. They do it every 2 years. I think it's still invite only. But you can kind of look up who they recommend and kind of get in touch with them. But they pair you up with a writing mentor to kind of help you on this new script. And I got paired up with this guy, Jim Taylor, and I was writing this other script. But all of the mentors would come in and give talks and kind of share about their experiences. And it was cool because I'd never thought of myself as a writer at that point. That was like the first time they're like, you're a writer. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's cool. And so I started to see myself as a writer, and I started to take myself seriously as a writer. And they taught you, they went through all the process, but one of the mentors that came to speak was Alex Dinalaris, and he's one of the writers of Birdman, who's also Latin and was the only Latin mentor. And in this kind of incredible talk, because he's kind of a genius when it comes to structure and very open and loves mentoring, he was like, if you have a script you want me to read, send it to me. Here's my email address. And I think there's only 2 of us that took him up on that offer. And so I sent him the script, and he was like, oh, I read it. When can you talk? Like, he's very short in his communications. And I like had this big notebook, and I was like, he's gonna tear it apart, and I'm like ready for it, because we kept talking about Aristotle and structure, and I had no idea about any of it. And I get on this call, and I'm just ready for him to like tell me how everything was wrong. And he was like, I loved your script. I think it's beautiful, and I want to help you make it. And so he got in with his producing partners and sent out the script, and then they optioned the script. I didn't know what that was. I had to Google it, but it's basically, and I'm Colombian, so I'm very paranoid as a human being, specifically Colombians from Bogota. So I copyright everything. As soon as I have a draft, I send it to the copyright office. It's their website is terrible, but it's very easy to do. And so basically it's an agreement, and you should get a lawyer, because if not, you will get eaten up. But it's an agreement where for a certain amount of time, they kind of own your copyright, and you're not allowed to shop it around to other people. And they go out to try to find the money. And our agreement was for 1.5 years with a 1.5 year extension. And there was like they pay you a very nominal fee at the beginning, and if they extend it, it's another fee. And that also negotiates how much you're gonna get paid if they end up making the film for the brackets. It like lays out all the points of the contract. And then we tried to make the film, which was very hard because first-time filmmaker, a film that spans multiple years with child actors, multiple actors playing the same role over time, female, queer, had done one short. So it wasn't like a great sell for people. So it took us some time, and they were like, you have to cast names. But because I'm Latin, it was very important to me to cast Latin people in the roles, and that excluded all Spaniards because they're Europeans. And that makes the people that can get you that money and get you that green light small. And we went out to all the names, and they're all like, nope. And so you're like, okay, what am I doing? It just became really difficult. And then Rene, his name was mentioned. Rene is Residente from Calle 13. He's huge rapper, a very famous rapper in Latin America. No one knows him in the US, but he is incredible. He's a total artist. And we mentioned it to him, and he was kind of like, yeah, thinking he's like, this is never gonna get done. I'm never gonna do it. Because he had never acted before in this way. He'd done his own music videos. But then slowly but surely, we got a casting director. We started doing open calls, and it kept being like there was momentum. People loved the script, and little by little, we started putting all the pieces together to get it financed. But it was all like, every step of the way, it was like it almost fell apart. You know, there was never enough money. There was never enough cash flow. There was always issues. Like, indie filmmaking is not for the weak. And yeah, this is what my shot list looked like, just so you guys know. So then, you know, we got the green light, but it was kind of like a yellow light, but they were like, go and do it, or just act as if it's happening, and we're like, okay. And for post-production, we were shooting in Las Cruces. They gave me my ticket 2 days before I left. So I was always like, is it happening? Is it not happening? Like, it was always super unclear, but then we went, the whole crew came. It was difficult, but I started working with my DP, and this is just how my brain works. This is what it's like inside my brain, and I showed it to my first AD and to my DP, and they're like, I can't read that. Like, love you, I have no idea what it is. So then, actually I'll come back to this one. Then I like translated it into something that is more digestible. And so this is what the shot list looks like that is less unhinged. But the thing that I did that I think was really, really vital before I created the shot list, before I started pre-production, before I started working with everyone else, is I called this like my prelim shot list. And I took each scene, and instead of being like, okay, where's the camera? How is the movement? What are the colors? I was like, what is the feeling of the scene? And whose scene is it? Like, whose POV is it? Because that's gonna dictate where your camera goes and what your movement goes. And how you communicate with your actors. You have to know what the feeling and purpose of each scene is. And asking myself questions. So it was a way for me, even though I knew the script very well, because I wrote it and it was based on my life, it was a way for me to like really know the script. So that any question that got asked to me on set, I could like be like, well, this scene is about Eva connecting with her dad and seeing him as like a magical creature. And so when they asked me like, what color are the walls? I could be like, well, what color would help convey that? Or, you know, questions like that. And like you get bombarded with a million questions, and just knowing your script really well and knowing all those motivations really well helps you get to be able to answer all those questions. This is us on set. I might show a few clips. I don't want to show too much because we're going to watch it later on today, but I want to pause to see if anyone has any questions about any of this process so far.
Can you talk about, does your brain switch when you're moving from being an editor to being a director, like thinking from the end, you know, from the end to the beginning, or is it all part of the same process for you?
I do think my brain switches, yeah. I think, because when I'm a writer, I don't think about how much something's gonna cost or how difficult it is. I'm just trying to tell the story, and I'm trying to tell it the best way possible. So I'm like, you know, I had a car crash, I'm working with kids, like there's it's not in the film, but there was like a dead rat at some point with live maggots, and I was like, it's fine, I'm just gonna put it on the page because I'm trying to tell the story. And then as a director, you're like, well, we have no money, so how are you gonna do that in a way that we can financially make it work? And sometimes things that I thought were gonna be difficult, like we shot in this canyon, it wasn't actually that bad. It was just a little rigorous, and we had to make sure we weren't stepping on any like rattlesnakes. But that ended up being a lot easier rather than like shooting at the gas station that I thought would be no big deal. We like could not secure a gas station, kept losing all these locations because they kept finding out it was a queer film, and so that there was other things that proved difficult. So I try not to judge, like with writer brain, doesn't know anything about director or doesn't know anything about producer. So I try not to think too much. The only thing that I think kind of follows me through all of them is maybe my editor brain, because I mean, if I could recommend for everyone to become an editor for a while before you make anything else, like I would, because it just kind of trains your brain to think about how to be concise in images and what coverage you need. You know, so if you're trying to tell a scene, even if it's like a one shot, you're like, what if that one shot doesn't work? Is there something some detail you can zoom in that could kind of go in to help you cover it? So I think that's the only part of my brain that maybe continues to stay with me through the process. And then when I'm an editor, I was like, fuck that writer, fuck that director, what do we have, what are we working with? Like, I don't care what was shot, I'm not precious about it. I was like, cut. You know, you're just trying to tell a good story at that point with the material that you have. Yeah.
What challenges did you come in with casting?
So many challenges, but you know, people always say that working with children is super hard, but that was the easiest part of the process for me. They're so honest, and they're bullshit meters, so you know, they're just make you be present, and it was such a pleasure. And I think they brought so much light, you know, because sets get really stressful and everybody's kind of like in their heads and they're just like playing and hugging, and they like develop this like high five thing they would do all the while. So I think that kept us kind of lively. I mean, I had a great experience working with all my actors, and I think being vulnerable with them and respecting their craft, because they're really, you know, you're asking them to be super vulnerable in front of the camera. You're asking them to dig into deep emotions, and I think figuring out how each actor works best was really important, you know, because if they're not getting it, you might not be communicating what you want clearly enough. So some actors, I would talk to them as their character, and that was like something to help them get in the mode, and they would ask me questions, and we would talk about what happened in between the summers and where they are in their lives. Other actors just needed a lot of hand-holding, and mostly like, you know, not like physically hugs, but like kind of where I'm like, you're doing great. And there was one actor in particular that every scene, every setup, I'd be like, do a take for you. And that was just to kind of loosen them and get them comfortable and get them feeling however they were feeling. Working with the 15-year-olds, like you're working with people with a lot of anxiety and a lot of insecurities, because that's what that age is. You have so many hormones, and you know, your body, no matter what it is, it's always terrible to you. And so making people feel uplifted and comfortable and safe, you know, because you're asking people to be vulnerable. You're asking them. So that's what was the thing. But for me, working with the actors was probably one of the easier parts of the process, even though it was emotionally taxing in some ways, because I think it's a lot to be vulnerable, but it was really fun.
Alessandra, we should probably wrap up in like 7 minutes.
Okay.
I feel like this is a great like advertisement for tonight.
Okay, so maybe not show the clips.
Like, maybe
Okay.
see if there's more questions or.
Yeah,
I don't
sorry,
know,
I guess I'm a long talker.
No, it's great. Great.
Any questions about any part of the process? Mm-hmm.
I guess one question. You mentioned like, you know, art is like a collaborative effort, and I was wondering, as someone that's like starting out, I kind of feel, what do you feel like is the best way to like collaborate and work with people, or meet those type of people you want to work with? Because I feel like sometimes I'm not sure, like, am I just trying to like write a really good script to send to someone, or
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, I think it depends on where you want to grow, but I mean, you're in a place where you are surrounded by artists. So it's like talking to people and seeing who you connect with, who's trying to do the kind of work you're interested in, and sending things, but also how can you help other people out on their projects? There's a lot that you can learn by working on other people's projects and learning about their process. I think it's just about connecting and seeing who might be a good fit to help you.
Were you the editor for In the Summers as well?
No, I wasn't. I hired a very amazing editor, and I needed that distance. This one was a little too much, and it was a little too stressful, and there was too much on my plate. But I worked alongside him the whole time, and it was super collaborative in that process. But yeah, now I think I'm at a point where I see the value in working with someone else and how important that distance is. And he was incredible. I really loved working with him.
What did you take away from directing Mammy that you brought to this film, particularly in terms of directing actors particularly?
Yeah, I think it's the giving actors time on set and letting them do takes. Yeah, being close up with them. I mean, in Mommy, we were able to do rehearsals because, again, it was like low budget and much shorter, and I wasn't able to do any rehearsals on In the Summer, so I was really trying to figure out how to communicate the scenes and how to make time for that as we were on set. But I mean, I learned everything, you know. I think and I'm still learning. Like, I feel like you never actually are done learning your craft, and you're always like are seeing your mistakes and how you can kind of continue to improve. yeah.
You mentioned yesterday that the actor who plays the dad felt that he wasn't a good person. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but the performance he gives brings great humanity to him, and so I'm wondering like how you managed that.
Yeah. Renee hates the character sort of that he played. He sees him as like super narcissistic and a bad dad, but that's like not my take on the character. So I would always, I would communicate those nuances to him, and I would always let him do his version of it at the beginning, and we would get that out, and and it would usually be a little angrier and a little darker. And sometimes we needed that for that scene, but oftentimes I needed something more complex. So I'd let him do that version first, and then I'd be like, we got that one. That one was nailed. It's in the can. We're good. How about we try it this way to just have a different version? And he was always open to that, and then that's how we can kind of continue to develop. So then that also gives you a lot of flexibility in the editing room, because like maybe one scene needs that, but if you do nothing else, then you have no ability to pull anything else in the editing room.
Did you have another person on set who you relied upon to talk about, hey, did we get that performance we needed? Is there somebody else you talked to, or was it all on you?
I think that was all on me for the most part. Yeah, you have your producers there, and you have, your people, but not really. I think they were just like, it's up to you, it's up to you. And I think also as a woman, like, it's like complicated because you want to be confident, but if you're too confident, then they label you as too confident. But if you ask too many questions and ask too many people their opinion, then you don't know what you're doing. So it's like something that I was conscious that I was having to navigate on set. Whether I did it successfully, I don't know.
So throughout this whole journey, did you ever feel a sense of imposter syndrome and like you've mentioned a lot of pressure yesterday. What did you do to kind of get yourself back in the creative zone?
I still feel imposter syndrome. I'm writing my next script, and I keep being like, because In the Summers was the first feature script I ever wrote. And so I was like, well, that might just be it. I have no idea. But I think it's like feeling that and acknowledging that and being like, that's a feeling, and then like throwing it away or putting it on a box, and then being like, now I just have to focus on what I'm trying to do, and I have to do it as to the best of my abilities and not let those doubts get in the way. It's a little bit of like fake it till you make it, but it's also just focusing in and knowing your story and being really clear in your vision and doing all the prep work to be clear in your vision, that then gives you the confidence. So you can be like, yeah, but this is what I want to tell, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be this way, so I'm just going to pretend I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm going to keep going with it.
That is such a great place to end.
Okay.
But wait, let's. I want to remind people that at 6:30 tonight you can come and see In the Summers, and Joe is going to have a conversation with Alessandra afterwards, and you're not going to be able to see this film anywhere else. This is the first screening since Sundance, and we don't know where else it's going to be shown, so you should definitely come and not think you can find it somewhere else. And also, you're all invited to go to the department office, which is just around the corner. We have food, and you can talk more to Alessandra or anybody else that you want to, okay? So thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Alessandra.
Are you going to the